Hello, my name is Sophie or Soro, and this video will be the start of my #SoroDrawMe series. For the first little episode of this series, my randomator chose Churchill.0 and her OC Akane. #SoroDrawMe is a new series that I wanted to start that would promote my art and others, as I will be talking about their OCs or them while describing my process and any likes or dislikes I had during it. At the moment, I'm doing part of my first sketch. I had some difficulty with Akane's hair, as I messed up a few times, but I think I did fairly well on keeping her hair a lot like the original. As I drew this, I imagined her to have incredibly thick hair, which would be a result on why her braids are so large. Akane is a very sweet and funny girl who controls fire. Her dress is red and it gradients to orange at the tips, which I think is a really cute design, and even funnier how ironic it is that Akane doesn't like spicy foods. It's funny because she controls fire, and rather than spicy foods or fiery ones, she prefers sweet food, which might be a result of her sweet personality. In the speed paint, I'm starting to work on line work. I do all my line work in this, at least the speed paint, with a 0.5 Copic line work pen. While doing line work, I tend to always start with the eyes, just because I tend to make the lines in the eyes a little bit thicker than the rest of the drawing. I think by making the line work on the eyes a little bit thicker, it just helps put focus on them and emphasis, and it makes you kind of look at them first rather than the rest of the picture. Off and on, I'm searching through my pencil case and moving my mouse around. Sometimes I couldn't find something through my pencil case and I didn't want to make the speed paint idle and just nothing happening, so I brought it up so that you could see what I was doing. Same with my mouse, it's on and off because there was ads on YouTube music videos and I didn't want the speed paint to just show nothing. Line work, in my opinion, is the easiest part of the drawing process. I just think it's really easy to go over the lines that I've already made, and sometimes that is not the case because you will mess up, and I've messed up a lot of my drawings, so I definitely need to have a balanced and steady hand when I'm doing line work, or else it can be pretty disastrous. I've personally messed up a lot of my drawings from accidentally messing up the line work, and it can be extremely sad. I do this a lot when I'm using my 0.03 Copic line work pen, which is really small, and so the mistakes on it can be really obvious. Back to Akane though, I'm actually curious on how she got her fire abilities, which is a perfect question for myself and others to ask, and stay tuned for when Turtle reveals that. But an interesting fact is that Akane is actually a hopeless romantic, which I thought was interesting with her personality, as characters with fire abilities tend to have heated or angry personalities. So I really like that Turtle did this because it sort of breaks the stereotype. At the moment, I'm starting to do watercolor for her hair. I have an Ohuhu watercolor brush pen set. It's sort of limited as I have 20 pens with 20 colors, but I think it gets the job done enough for now. Typically, after I do the lines with my brush pen, I smooth them out with a water brush. I'm using two types of water brush here. I use the brush that came with the Ohuhu set and another brush of an unknown set. I don't have the label on it anymore, but I got it for Christmas, so that's all I know about that other brush. I did her hair in a few layers because I think that the pink I was using wasn't exactly dark enough to match Akane's original hair color, so I went over it a few times to make it darker and to make it sort of just more in depth. By going over it a few times, it did mess up the paper, but that was my fault because I was using a multimedia purpose paper rather than specifically a watercolored paper. So I'm going over it again, just like I had said, just to give it more depth and make the roots and the braids darker since the hair creases in certain areas than others. I tend to do this process a few times just to see what looks good and what doesn't. Sorry for that. Down below on the bottom of the braid, I was having a little bit of trouble with the paper, so I just kind of left it alone to let it sit and dry for a little bit. After I did the watercolor, I continued with a pink Copic brush. I don't have many Copics, but fortunately I had a pink one. I also went over it and did the skin in Copic. It was just kind of to darken it up a little bit. At the moment, I'm now going over with a purple gold jelly roll pen just to kind of brighten her hair ties up a little bit. After the purple gold pen, I went over it with a white jelly roll pen. I just wanted to kind of smear it around so that it had more of a texture. I don't really know why I did that, but I did. And now I'm going over it with the red for her red dress. This was fairly one of the easiest parts because it was a solid color, so I did have the right color for this, and it was just all evenly the same color. So I just had to basically worry about blending it in and making certain areas not as much darker as others, since watercolor tends to fade in certain areas if there's not enough paint. After I was finished with the red, I added a bit of a darker touch to it with my other red Ohuhu pen. I lightened it up a little bit just by going over it so that there was darks and lights in her dress, and after I had done that, I went in and added some gray to her eyes so that her eyes would have depth everywhere. The only problem I had at this point was the fact that the Copics kind of smeared her hair a little bit, but I did go over it with a bit of purple. This wasn't in her original design, but I did feel it was necessary because it added her darker tone in her hair rather than just the light pink. After I went over again with the Copics on her skin to sort of add a little bit more darker shadows, and then I went on to move with her eyes. Her eyes actually had what it looked like a galaxy type of texture, so I went ahead and did that to her eyes. And that's another question we can all ask Chortle is, where did she get her eyes? You know, what parents? Because her eyes are galaxy-like, and I think this is really pretty, but also, how? After I'm done with her eyes, I went back around with my jelly roll pens, and I just sort of added a little bit of highlights here and there. I tried to use the reference of her hair to kind of add the highlights, and I think I did fairly well while doing so. I really like jelly roll pens because they save the day when it comes to fixing up line work and making everything look all pretty. After I went and added in some darker line work just because the paint kind of smeared certain areas, I continued with the jelly roll pens, and I went back to add a thicker line with my BM Copic brush. I did have a mistake here, as you will see in a minute. And I used a hand motion to express it even. A little piece of the BM brush came off and it smeared with my nail, and so even in this case, I have similar mistakes to everyone else, and so I just went over it and added hearts to kind of make it a little bit better, and then I just went over it again with jelly roll pens to fix the day.